What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Red and Bold Show. I am your host, Marc Adams. You can find me at 49ers Camelot, whether you're on X or whether you're listening or watching somewhere. I'm joined by my co-host, Anthony Robertson, who you can find at 49ers Cutback, whether it's on X or wherever you're watching or listening. So go check out both of our channels. We would also appreciate it if you'd subscribe, like, do all that kind of stuff because it helps us out. We appreciate that, and thanks everybody for joining us so far. Ant, I'm 30 seconds in, and I haven't said hi to you. That's rude of me.
How's it going, Mark? It's good to be back. You had a great personal thing last week with the graduations. Everyone doing graduations. Your daughter graduates, so congratulations to her. And it's nice to be back and being able to talk about the things that we didn't get to talk about last week. So it's going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. I hope that you are doing well. And I'm looking forward to getting some 49ers content because I think there's a lot for us to talk about. And I'm curious to hear your perspective on some of the things that have happened.
Yeah, there is a lot to talk about. I mean, not only have we gone through OTAs, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, but there is the mandatory mini camp coming up in just a few days here, Tuesday and Wednesday. And what is that? That's June the 10th and 11th, Tuesday and Wednesday. So NFL teams can do 3 days worth of mandatory mini camps. And a lot of teams do that. They'll do 3 days. The 49ers typically do 2 days. And then on the third day, do some kind of team building thing, like a cook-off or a cookout or whatever. Maybe they do cook-offs. I don't know. They've done other things in the past, but it seems like the cookout is their norm. It's like their go-to thing.
Yeah, I think they went bowling before. So they've had some different things. I think it's a really good experience for the team because you go through these mandatory mini camp, and really all that is to get everyone together. It's less about what you're going to be learning because everything you do in mini camp, you're going to do at the beginning of training camp. All the things you've been doing at OTAs, that's how you start training camp. You go through all of that. You have the install period. So this is a really good time to get people familiar with each other, get them familiar with what's to be expected when they get to training camp. This is especially for young players and for guys who are coming in to play for the 49ers for the first time. So it's kind of a good experience. And I love that Kyle Shanahan is very, set in his ways about making sure these guys get that personal time together because chemistry amongst teammates is one of the most important things. When the season gets grueling, you want to be able to look to your teammate and have that relationship that I don't want to let my teammate down, right? That is something Bill Walsh always stressed is I got your back. And that is something that is still permeates through the organization right now. And Kyle Shanahan is continuing that. So I like that process. I think it's very important to have good relationships with your teammates. That's going to produce on the field.
Based on what you know, is there really any difference between OTAs and the minicamp other than the fact that the minicamp is mandatory and the OTAs are voluntary? Do they do basically the same thing in the classroom and on the field?
Yeah, they do. It's the same sort of things. They're just trying to get you introduction into the offense, introduction to the defense, special teams, getting you used to doing what we call everyday drills. These are drills you're going to go through every single day that kind of build the basis for what you're going to do on the field, and it gets those proper techniques for how to do things. So, yeah, this is something that's very routine and repetitious, but repetition is what takes kind of the thinking out of it. You can do it without thinking. You can do it well. And so it's just all coaching right now. So OTAs and minicamp are very much similar, and it's actually very similar to the beginning of training camp. The only thing with training camp now is you kind of are just going to ramp it up because you have a certain amount of process that you have to get through. So you kind of rush through it a little bit more. That's why if you have a basis, it's a little bit easier when you get to training camp. Those guys who don't miss OTAs and minicamp will be ready when they get to training camp.
Yeah, and that's when things get really fun, and we have storylines that we'll discuss. And because basically when they finish the mandatory minicamp, there's around 40 days. Maybe it's exactly 40 days. They haven't set the dates for training camp as far as I've seen yet. And so it's going to be around 40 days that they're going to be off, which is good for them, but that makes our job harder because we have to find other things to talk about. But the good news is with this team, it's never boring. So let's get into starting to discuss this. There are two latest additions for the 49ers. They signed or they traded for edge rusher Bryce Huff. He's been with the Eagles and with the Jets. So the question that I have for Bryce Huff, or regarding Bryce Huff, is can he return to that 2023 version? It seems like he was not really being used in the right way, and he dealt with injuries last year. And then Malik Knowles, the wide receiver. This is a guy who, out of Kansas State, was a big-time playmaker. A lot of people had high hopes for him. So far, he's been with the Packers and Vikings and has yet to step on an NFL field during a regular season game. I don't know. I don't even know if he's been dressed or anything like that for, I don't think that he has. So I think he's been inactive both of his NFL seasons because he's been in the NFL 2 years, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the question for Bryce Huff, can he return to that 2023 version? And for Malik Knowles, can he be a guy for the 49ers? Because I saw that our buddy John Chapman was excited about this. I was really excited about the Bryce Huff trade because I think that he has the potential to bring something that the 49ers have been missing. Not saying he's going to be Dee Ford, but he has the potential to bring something that they've been missing. And John was excited about Malik Knowles because he really liked him coming out of college. So where are you at on these two additions?
Yeah, I think first with Bryce Huff, this was something the 49ers desperately needed. When you look at the makeup of the defensive line, they needed a designated pass rusher. It didn't have to be a speed rush element per se, but it needed to be somebody that was really good when it came to rushing the passer. So you could allow Mikael Williams to develop. So you could allow Yetur Gross-Matos to move inside, which was really the vision for him last year when they signed him from Carolina. This opens the door for that by getting Bryce Huff and making a good trade. I mean, a 5th-round pick for a player that had 10 sacks 2 years ago playing for your current defensive coordinator means he's a scheme fit. You don't have to ask the question. You already know because you've seen it work. And if anyone's going to know Bryce Huff's strengths and weaknesses, it's going to be Robert Saleh after coaching him for 3 seasons. He coached him when he didn't have great production. He coached him when he did. The one thing about Bryce Huff and his production under Robert Saleh was immediately when Robert Saleh got there in 2021, Bryce Huff's quarterback hits elevated right away. So he was getting close to the quarterback as soon as Robert Saleh got there. So that means that this is a guy that's going to put pressure on the quarterback consistently, and that's what you needed. But I think what it did was it opened the door for the 49ers to put together a pass rush element when it comes to 3rd and long that we haven't seen since 2019. And that is 4 guys that can get after the quarterback, especially if you want to go super NASCAR and you put Mikael Williams and Yetur Gross-Matos on the inside with Bosa and with Bryce Huff on the outside. And I think that's an element that they haven't had in a while. So 3rd and 12s now are very important. And with the way the 49ers built the defense with run stoppers in the draft, now you're stopping the run. You're forcing more 3rd and longs, making it more advantageous for a Bryce Huff. Now, Bryce Huff has a lot of technique things that he does really well. He has a very good sidestep move. It's almost like a crossover where he gets your body going one way and he goes the other way, dips underneath it. It's very technical. I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised with what Bryce Huff is going to provide. And I think just watching him on film, I see a player that's going to help the 49ers immensely and help Nick Bosa, especially on 3rd down. So I love this trade for the 49ers. I think this was as close to a home run as you can get. You didn't give up a lot, but you got a lot in return. And it's a familiar face.
Yeah.
When it comes to Malik Knowles, this one, you're right. John Chapman loves it. And if you watch Malik Knowles coming out of Kansas State, you see a guy that's got versatility. You can move him around. You can use him in different ways. He also has the ability to do some of the gadget stuff, right? Some of the screens, some of the fly sweeps, those types of things. But it's coming from a bigger body, 6'2", over 200 pounds. And we're seeing the 49ers kind of go that way a little bit. Isaiah Hodgins, Isaiah Nayer. You're getting some bigger bodies now that are going to be able to compete physically. And I kind of like that element. So do I know what Malik Knowles is going to be able to do? No, because like you said, we haven't seen it. We didn't see it in Minnesota. We didn't see it in Green Bay. And so this is a complete projection. But if you're going to lose a guy like Trent Taylor and, you kind of knew what he was going to be, why not take a flyer on someone you don't know? Let's see what could happen if you get a young guy out there that can produce. So I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do at camp. And I think the 49ers have some very unique skill sets at wide receiver. And I'm hoping one of these guys shows up and shows out, and we got ourselves a really good player that we could talk about.
Yeah, I think it was Larry Krueger that was talking about could Malik Knowles possibly be used in a Deebo Samuel type way. Now, he doesn't have the Deebo Samuel body, like the bowling ball kind of body, but he's really good after the catch. Just, back in college, that was what he was known for. So, I don't want to put anybody in that kind of, this is the next Deebo Samuel. I don't want to go down that road, but I do think that he could be the kind of guy that they find ways, whether it's on a sweep or a reverse or something like that, where they they can just get the ball in his hands and see what he can do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what you're really looking for, is these guys that can make something happen with the ball in their hands. And we're seeing a little bit of a shift when it comes to the 49ers mentality on how they're building wide receiver right now. You've got guys that, are being able to create horizontal separation, get open, get some yards. And we're seeing the 49ers kind of go with some vertical threats as well. Jordan Watkins, Jacob Cowing, these guys can stretch it vertically. But that overall playmaker, that guy that's going to get the ball in their hand like Deebo Samuel, we didn't really have that. And so that's going to be one of the interesting developments, is who's going to kind of step up into that role and be a guy that's a playmaker. Will it be a Jordan Watkins, or will it be one of these new guys that they brought in? I think that's interesting, because it could just be Christian McCaffrey for all we know. But the 49ers are definitely going to have to figure out who has that element. We know they got Kittle. We know they got McCaffrey. But the wide receiver room is unproven. And it's not a bad thing to have an unproven wide receiver room, but it just means that with this opportunity, people are going to have to step up. And I think that's what's exciting. There's at least some excitement with the chance that these young guys could be something special, especially when you see some of the body types and physicality that they play with.
Yeah, and I see some people in the chat talking about Jordan Watkins and hoping for some great things for him. We're going to talk about him in a minute when we discuss what stood out the most from OTAs. And I mean, he was one of the positive things that we've heard from OTAs. So, I'm hopeful, but at the same time, there's no pads, there's no press, and there are a lot of guys who look good this time of the year, and then when training camp starts, they kind of disappear. So yeah, but I am hopeful because I do like Jordan Watkins. Thought that I saw something in here that I wanted to. Okay, yeah. Lowbridge said, "Hey guys, what the heck is going on with BA?" He's talking about Brandon Aiyuk. Feels like he's killing the OTA vibe. I know he's killing mine. And so that's a great segue there from Lowbridge, because that was my next question on here. What's going on with Brandon Aiyuk? There are social media posts where, first let's go back to that whole thing where TJ Houshmandzadeh, Houshmandzadeh, however you want to say his name.
Houshmandzadeh, lock it up.
Where he was saying that Brock Purdy was overrated. And of course, TJ Houshmandzadeh, Houshmandzadeh. If you don't know, there was a commercial back in the day where they were butchering his name on purpose. It was kind of funny. But where he said that Brock Purdy's overrated, or no, he was overpaid. And it just so happens that he's Brandon Aiyuk's personal wide receiver coach. So people immediately started saying, especially one particular beat writer started saying, well, this is Brandon Aiyuk passing this along. That does not mean that at all. I mean, former NFL players can have their own opinions. They don't need somebody to tell them what they think. And Brandon Aiyuk doesn't necessarily mean. Now, I also saw that that one particular beat writer is saying that there may be a problem between Brock Purdy and Brandon Aiyuk because Brock Purdy did not attend Aiyuk's wedding, this and that. But again, we don't know the situation. Maybe Purdy wasn't available that particular time. Who knows? And so I'm not going to draw any kind of conclusions. The only thing that I'm going to say to this is this is from 49ers wide receiver coach Leonard Hankerson. who talked about Brandon Aiyuk being all in, that he's even acting like a coach to the younger players. This is what he said. He's been in meetings and catching up on the mental part as far as seeing it on film. He's also been doing a great job in meetings, having an extra set of eyes for myself. I ask him questions and have him coach up guys. So that doesn't sound like a player who wants to be traded. It doesn't sound like a player who's mad about his contract, which he has no business being mad about his contract. So I think that a lot of this is just much ado about nothing. What do you think about the situation? Are you like, this is nothing, let's move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, I don't know how many teammates go to each other's weddings. I don't think it was Brandon Ayuk inviting everyone. And just because Brock Purdy's not there is not saying much about their relationship. But also, some people are just teammates. I mean, outside of the team, they're not as close of friends, and that's okay. When they're in the building, they're great friends. When they're outside the building, they're doing their own thing. Jimmy Garoppolo was real famous for that. And so
Yeah.
I think that we could read too much into who's at what and who's doing what. I heard from Brandon Aiyuk last year during the whole process, tried to make sure, he said several times that he wasn't trying to slight Brock Purdy when he was talking about how good Jaden Daniels was. And I don't think he would have went out of his way to say that. Deebo Samuel did the same thing when he went to Washington. He made sure, because Brock Purdy's not the kind of guy that has beef with anyone. Brock Purdy is not that kind of individual. He gets along with people, and if they don't, they have a little bit of an issue, they work through it. So I don't think this is something that it really involves Brock Purdy. I think that if Brandon Aiyuk is upset, well, then Brandon Aiyuk is upset. But I think that as long as it doesn't filter into this football team, it doesn't matter. So I haven't got too much into the social media stuff when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk. I'm not overly concerned about it right now. I think this thing is going to work out. And right now, he's got to get back on the field, but he's not going to be at the forefront. And I kind of wish that we would just let him be. As people that are podcasters or content creators, let Brandon Aiyuk be. Let him do his thing. Let him get recovered. And let's focus on the other 90 guys that are going to be trying to get themselves together. And we'll focus on that. And when Brandon Ayuk's time to come back, then we could talk about Brandon Aiyuk. But I think that's part of his thing too, is like people are hyper focused on him. And yeah, I get it. People are upset with his social media posts, but it's social media. Like, let's just let them do that and let's talk about football. So yeah, I'm not real concerned about it.
Yeah, last year he even admitted that he liked the attention. So that could be part of what he's doing. When you're out with an injury, you're not being talked about near as much. And so that's certainly the case in the off season. So it's very possible that he likes bringing, kind of putting stuff out there, just so, whether it's subtweets or whatever it is that he does, just so that he's continued to be talked about. But I agree. I really don't think it's anything to be concerned about. All right, let's talk about what stood out the most from OTAs. The first thing that stood out to me was that Trent Williams was there. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I love that Trent's there because it's the veteran leadership. But it shows that nobody's above showing up, right? It shows the young players. It kind of puts a process now that, hey, nobody's above it. Everyone's going to go through the process. And I love that. And Trent is also going to have so many young players. I mean, just look at that interaction he had with Mikael Williams. They're on opposite sides of the ball. They're going to be working together at training camp because they're going to be facing off against each other. But they were kind of joking around and building a chemistry. Those are the types of things that are going to be huge for this football team. And we need those guys to work together. So I love getting Trent Williams out there. He looks in good shape. He looked like he was moving really well. And, he's primed to kind of get this thing going. And a healthy Trent Williams and a Trent Williams that's producing is going to go a long ways for the 49ers, stabilizing that O-line. And I think he knows too, it's not just Aaron Banks this year that he's been playing with for a while, but this is Ben Bart. So he's got to build a chemistry with the other guys that are going to be playing left guard. And I'm glad that he's out there and he's doing a good job as a leader. That's what you have to do. Show up. That's the first step. And Trent Williams is that guy.
Yeah, I really hope that he can stay healthy because he's the key to the offensive line. I saw this question because the next one I want to talk about is Jacob Cowing. It sounds like he's shown up and has looked good, looked better than he looked last year, looked bigger. I saw that Josh in the chat wrote, love Cowing, but I don't think he'll work out on this team, sadly. You and I talked weeks ago about Jacob Cowing, and I had concerns that he wouldn't make the team, partly because the 49ers drafted Junior Bergen, who at first, and I'll admit that I'm wrong all the time, Junior Bergen was drafted to be the punt returner. And I said, if that's all he does, he's not going to make the team. And then it came out that Brant Boyer, the special teams coordinator, specifically picked him, like hand-picked him. So then I said, okay, he's going to make the team, which then made me go, okay, so what does that mean for Jacob Cowing? And we talked about that. But now that I'm hearing the stuff, and again, no pads, no press, all that, but I'm hearing good things about Cowing, and if he's muscled up some and can block better, and now he knows the offense better, he could make the team. So what do you think about the reports that Jacob Cowing has looked good so far? Obviously, when training camp comes, that's the real test. But what do you think about what we've heard about him so far?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the time when wide receivers are going to look good. I mean, this is 7-on-7 time, right? This is, no pressure, nobody like getting physical with you. So you're going to. I want to preface that because I do think that Jacob Cowing's made strides, because Brock Purdy talked about the fact he's taking first reps now, a lot of times going through drills, which means he's comfortable now with what's expected of him. And so I think that's where the biggest jump probably happened, is up here mentally. Yeah. He understands the playbook. He understands what the team and the coaches are expecting from him. That was one of the big things that held him back last year. But there are a lot of elements as well with Jacob Cowing we still have to see on the field when we get to training camp. And one of those is blocking, because he's never going to drive anyone off the ball. He's never going to blow anyone up, but he has to be able to get in their way and be a shield, so that way he can hold them up a little bit, so that way the running back can get by. And so that is going to be one of the key elements. Also, we talked about that with the physicality. How is he going to be able to play off some of the physical corners that he's going to deal with in San Francisco? Renardo Green, Diamond Lenore, even Upton Stout is going to get physical with him in the slot. If he's able to use his speed and he's put on a little bit of strength where he can be able to separate a little bit, he's going to have himself an opportunity to produce on this team. But it's going to come down to knowledge, understanding what he's supposed to do, and then doing the little things. But I am optimistic. I like hearing the positive stories. I love optimism going into training camp. So I'm not ready to crown him as, the next guy that's going to tear it up. But yeah, I think this is a good step. And, maybe he can potentially produce and be a top, 3 or 4 wide receiver when we start the season. And we're still missing Brandon Aiyuk, and potentially Demarcus Robinson is out. I think that would be huge for the 49ers. If they can hit on Jacob Cowing too, and Jacob Cowing can produce for this team, he will open up the playbook a little bit more for Kyle, and that will make things easier for everyone else, because he does have that dynamic 4-3 speed, and he is able to stack corners down the field, which is huge. So the 49ers need that, and he adds an element that they just don't have, besides now Jordan Watkins that they've added to the team.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I heard that I think it was Larry Krueger said that Junior Bergen has not looked good in practice as a punt returner, that he's dropping. I think he meant as a punt returner. Maybe he was talking about as a receiver, but he said that he was dropping the ball, just did not look comfortable, which I think is to be understood, for a rookie to have some jitters. But if he struggles and they need to turn to Cowing, then I don't think Bergen will make the team, and I think Cowing will. But again, we'll see once we get into that. Next on the list, Jordan Watkins has been impressive. People have talked about him in the chat. Sounds promising. Hopefully he can show, if he can show this in training camp and the preseason, then I'm going to be even more excited than I am now. I'm cautiously optimistic, because I think that Watkins, this has kind of been his MO, so to speak, that he's looked good at times. For example, he was absolutely amazing against Arkansas last year, but, not that impressive in many of his other games. So what do you take when you hear that he's looking good? Is it just cautious optimism, or are you like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen?
I think it's just cautious optimism. I didn't know this was what's going to happen. I think it's what the 49ers are hoping is going to happen with, Jordan Watkins. But whenever you're talking about a mid-round pick, You don't know how quickly they're going to assimilate to playing the NFL game, to learn the system, learn the offense. And let's remember, right now it's install. These are all the base plays. What happens when these rookies start getting underwater in training camp, when all of a sudden they get to the second and third part of install, and now they've got motions and they've got shifts and they have 3 plays called in the huddle, and they've got to figure out what they're doing in each of those. That's when it starts getting complicated. That's when receivers don't line up in the correct position or go in motion like they're supposed to, because not only are they thinking about what they're doing pre-snap, but then they got to think about what they're doing post-snap. And then because you're doing all that thinking, you're not paying attention to the zone coverage or the man coverage. So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to young receivers. And so, yeah, they're going to look good now. And that's great. I want them to look good now. That's important. You got to be able to create separation, because when they do figure it out, this is the part of their game that's going to be elevated. But there's a lot of things still that are going to happen in the process. So we're optimistic. We're hopeful that these guys can come in and make an impact. But we're also realistic to understand they've got a long ways to go in this process. And even when we get into the first part of preseason, they're still going to be learning a lot of this offense. And guess what? It doesn't stop there, because they're going to have basically a new offense every single week, because the game plan changes from team to team. So there's just a lot to learn and understand. But Leonard Hankerson was very upfront with Jordan Watkins. Watkins said that in an opening interview with the media. He said, Coach said, this offense is going to be very difficult for me to pick up, and I'm going to have to work my way in. And I think that's the best way to think about it. These guys are going to be working their way in throughout the process.
Yeah, I agree. And goes along with the comment from David Marazzo, who said, I think Watkins will be eased in as a rookie. Lots to learn. Yeah, that's I agree with that. They're gonna do that. And if you could, can you that comment from Lowbridge, can you star that? I want to come back to that here in a minute.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay, so the next one is that D Winters has looked good. I'm going to predict that D Winters starts the season alongside Fred Warner as the starter, but he may not hold on to that starting role. What do you think?
I think it's very probable, that D Winters is probably the starting will linebacker. I think he's got the better understanding of the 49ers defense and the responsibilities. It's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for Nick Martin. And I think we're all very hyped up on what Nick Martin could be. I mean, just listening to the coaches talk about him and then just hearing the conversation about what he's been doing so far at OTAs. You think about those things, but with D Winters, this is a guy that was really good in coverage last year. And if there's one element to your will linebacker spot that you need is coverage, because guess what? That's what they're doing when they're putting you in sub packages. I will say the improvement has to be when it comes to run defense for D Winters. He wasn't great last year, but I have a little bit more optimism because Johnny Holland said he's the most improved linebacker from last year to this year. And I felt like he took a huge jump from his rookie season to last year. So if he keeps making these jumps, I think it's very probable. I think your point about him maybe not having that starting spot the entire time is going to be completely dependent on how quickly Nick Martin is able to assimilate to this 49ers defense and figure it out. I said that I thought too when I was going through the depth chart that I did believe at some point the 49ers would somewhat start making them share reps at will linebacker during the season. And I thought by the end of the year, it might end up being 60% D Winters, 40% Nick Martin as they continue to adjust these guys, because I think D Winters is better in coverage. So if you're going to have a team that's going to be an 11 personnel that wants to pass a lot, it might be better to go D Winters. And if you're going to go a team that's 11 personnel to get a smaller group so they can run the ball on you, it might be better to go Nick Martin, who's the better run stopper. So just knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your players and then using them accordingly. But I think they both have the skill set to play will linebacker in the NFL.
All right, a couple of questions here before I move on to the other OTA thoughts. Rusty asks, any additional thoughts on Mac Jones? Is it possible he's not smart enough to grasp Kyle's system? I kind of doubt that. I think that his system takes time, but I did hear somebody say, dang, who was that? I can't think of who it was, but I did hear somebody predict that who's the third string quarterback? His name slipped me. The guy from
I got it right
daggone it. Somebody in the or somebody in the
it's Tanner Mordecai.
Yeah, Tanner Mordecai.
Yeah.
Should have known him because he used to be at OU. I had somebody said that, and it wasn't just a fan, it was somebody who knows football, that they believe that Mordecai is going to beat out Mac Jones for the number 2 spot. I do not
Larry
believe
Krueger.
that.
I'm going on a limb and say it's Larry Kruger.
That could be.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was.
He loves Tanner Mordecai, so
he does. He loves all of the backups. I don't think that that's going to happen, though. I think that Mac Jones is going to be fine. I think that he's going to be QB2 this season.
Yeah, I think Mac's going to be okay. I think he was being real with the media when he talked about there's a lot of this offense to learn. And, he got a little bit of a base for it because Steve Sarkisian was in Alabama, at times. So there was a little bit of it there. But this is a different type of offense if you're not used to the timing. It's hey, 3 steps, ball comes out, or 3 steps in a hitch, 5 steps in a hitch. There's so much nuance and timing to what you have to do. And you have to stay on timing, and then your wide receivers have to stay on timing, and you're throwing to spots. Guys who are used to it, they're pretty good at it, right? Joe Montana was phenomenal at it. That's what made him great. And then you look at Steve Young, he struggled developing that part of his game early, but once he got it, then it was like, okay, he's going to kill everybody because he's got the natural skills. So this is a part of Mac Jones' game that's got to develop. But I do think he's smart enough to run this offense. He's going to pick it up. It just might be a little bit more patience than it takes for a Sam Darnold who played in different systems and systems that were a little bit more similar to what the 49ers had before he got here. So bigger adjustment for Mac. I think that he will figure it out, though. I think he will be the backup quarterback this year. Next year, let's see. Curtis Rourke, if he gets healthy, how comfortable they feel. Maybe they want to trade Mac Jones next year. That'll be something interesting. But he's going to be quarterback 2 for this season.
Yeah, and others are saying that it was Larry Kruger saying it. And I do remember that now because it was his bold prediction. And because he was talking about how Mordecai's got a big arm. This other from Shifty's 49ers talk, is it confirmed that Demarcus Robinson will miss the first 3 weeks or still speculation? It has not been confirmed, but I don't really know that it's speculation. I mean, it's going to happen. I'd be stunned if it didn't happen. I mean, he had a DUI. He was driving like 100 miles an hour when he was pulled over. So it's going to happen, but it hasn't been confirmed yet.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most interesting things is it was, I believe, Matt Mayoko that reported that it was going to eventually be a 3-game suspension, but nothing has come down from the NFL. We don't know if the NFL has talked to the 49ers about when they're going to get information on this, but it's interesting that the NFL has yet to decide on the repercussions of the DUI. So it's a waiting game for the 49ers and for Demarcus Robinson. I think it feels inevitable, but we don't know for sure. So until something happens, that's how we have to keep prefacing it. It's expected he's going to miss the first 3 games, but if he's there, I'm sure the 49ers would love to have him. That would be huge for them if he's not suspended.
Yeah, definitely. Next on the OTA list is that Ben Barch has been the left guard. You've been saying that it's going to be Ben Barch, and so far that's what it looks like.
Yeah, he's getting all the reps, and he looks pretty athletic. I mean, from the cut-ups that I've been able to see of him at OTAs. And I think that just seeing what he did last year, it felt like it was very much going to be him. And then right now, Nick Zakelj is getting the number 2 reps. So it looks like that's going to be the competition, but Barch is out in front. And I think that's been kind of the thought process the whole entire time. I think he's seen to be that guy. And we're going to see what happens. I think that Ben Barch has showed the ability to be a consistent interior player in the NFL. And that his consistency is probably what Chris Foerster's looking at. Is the other guys, you might get something better, right? If you had Nick Zakelj, you're going to get better pass protection. If you put in Spencer Burford, you're going to get a better run blocker. But neither one of those guys have consistency when it comes to the other areas of their game. That's where Ben Barch is successful, and that's why he's the most likely to be the left guard at this point.
When Ben Barch replaced, man, I cannot remember any names. Aaron Banks last year, he was really good. And from what I've heard, the coaches were really disappointed when he got hurt because they thought that they were going to be seeing the rest of the season seeing something from him that would carry over into 2025, but then he was injured himself.
It probably saved him money though, Mark, because if he would have played really well, they probably would have had to pay him more than the $1 million that they paid him. So it probably did end up saving him in the pocketbook.
Yeah. So the coaches were bummed, but Jed York was happy. Sounds like Evan Anderson has looked really good. His body apparently looks better. He's been throwing people around. So good stuff to hear about Evan Anderson.
Yeah, Chris Kacerek talked about the fact he still needs to work on his body. I think that with his height, they would like him to be more the CJ West size. He came in last year over 330 pounds, and I think they'd love him to be around 315 because he's not exactly, tall and long. And so that is something that I'm sure they're willing for him to do, is cut that weight and create more speed, because right now we've talked about the fact he can't rush the passer consistently. Part of the reason is he's just a little bit more slow-footed, than the other guys you play that one-tech position. Now, one thing that makes it difficult for Evan Anderson, and I want to make sure I put this out there so everyone realizes, they drafted 2 guys to play ahead of him at his position. They drafted Alfred Collins and they drafted CJ West. And then Chris Kacerek said that having long arms and long limbs makes you more able to play 3-tech. So that means CJ West is going to be ahead of Evan Anderson more than likely, and probably Alfred Collins going back and forth with versatility. So I don't know what we're going to get out of Evan Anderson. I do know that last year he improved mightily from training camp through the season. So that's good. If he worked on his body and did the things he was supposed to do, there's a chance he could be on this roster. But I think he's closer to the bubble than people think, because the 49ers have so many guys lined up at 1-tech right now. And so they're going to have to make some decisions. But all he has to do right now is beat out a guy like Kalia Davis. I think that they're in a competition for that kind of last roster spot, but I think he's closer on the bubble than people think he is.
Is there any word on Alfred Collins and that injury? I don't know when he's supposed to be back.
Training camp. According to Kyle Shannon and John Lynch, they said that he had re-injured the calf during his prepare for his pro day, because he had hurt it in the process, then re-injured it then, and now everything's precaution. So he's been working out on the side field, but the full expectation is he'll be a full go for training camp, which I think is a smart move. Let's wait. You don't need to go through minicamp, right? They said the same thing about Pearsall. What's the point of going through minicamp? Just wait, get those extra 40 days to get your body right. When training camp comes around, Alfred Collins should be good to go.
All right. Next is that I've heard Larry Krueger multiple times giving love to your boy Tatum Bethune, who he calls Tatum Bethune.
Yeah, it reminds me of there was a old school movie, and the guy's last name was Bethune, and it was they would say it so weird. I think of Bill Nye, it was the one that did the Clear Eyes. He was in it. He would say it funny, Bethune.
Yeah, the guy from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah, it was Angus. That's what the movie was. And when I hear that, that's what I think about. Yeah, Tatum Bethune is he's solid. That was the one thing coming out of Florida State. I'd watched so much of him during his career. He was solid when it came to run stopping. That was not the problem. He had pretty good instincts. It was question marks about coverage. How was he going to be in space? And he's a 4.77 guy. So it's not like he has makeup speed where if somebody gets out on him, he's not going to be able to make up ground. So one of the things he had to work on with his body, well, it's good to hear that Fred Warner said he's kind of remade his body, and hearing the other coaches talk about the fact that, he's kind of transformed himself and got himself into pro body shape is important, because now those instincts, when they take over, he's going to have a little bit more to get there, a little bit more speed. And I think he's also one of those guys that understanding things is kind of his superpower. So the more comfortable he is in the system and what expected of him, he's going to be a half a tick quicker. And so I think that that's going to play into it. So I don't think it's out of the question that Tatum Bethune pushes, to be one of those guys that is involved in a 4-3, as your Sam linebacker. I don't think it's out of the question that he's in that at all, but I do think he's in the mix to make this football team with a linebacker group that, if you look at it now, is very talented and has an opportunity to be pretty deep during the season, not only for the defense, but for the special teams and what they're going to be able to do there. So I like Bethune. All comes down to coverage for him.
Last thing that I have is that I've heard from multiple people that CJ West looks violent that his hands are so strong, and that when he's hitting like in these drills, when he's hitting these employees or whoever they're, I don't know who they have that holds the those pads. But I can tell you that back in high school, I was not one of the starters, and I used to hold those pads, and it's not always fun. It didn't hurt, except maybe if you had somebody who was just really a beast. But I guess he's knocked some people way back, and which, I mean, these are probably smaller guys, so that's not really unexpected. But sounds like he's just been looking great.
Yeah, I think it's hard to evaluate defensive linemen or offensive linemen about things that have to do with power, things that have to do with, getting off the ball, driving someone back or anchoring. Those things are tough to see when you just got, like you said, individuals holding bags and you're not going one-on-one, and really seeing that. You can see it a little bit against the sled and stuff like that. But what you can see is the technique. And I think if you just go look at CJ West Indiana film, you're going to see a guy whose technique has displayed that, yeah, he has that thump to be able to get those heavy hands and hit these guys in the chest plate and get them to get back on their heels, rock them back on their heels. That's a key element. And so he does that. He resets the line of scrimmage a lot of times as a defensive tackle. So the good thing is you can see that on film at Indiana. I think it's going to translate well to the San Francisco 49ers game. And you're going to see a guy who's going to be able to play with more freedom. That's one of the things I'm most excited about for CJ West and Alfred Collins is playing within the 49ers attack style defense and what they're going to be able to do, where it's not just about occupying blockers all the time, but sometimes it's about getting in the backfield and wreaking havoc. Both guys are 4.95 guys with good lateral quickness and good pop in their hands and strength. I think it's going to be fun to see these guys, but I'm super hyped for West. And yeah, right now he's going to make guys fly who are holding bags. And during the season, we might see some opportunities for him to make some really good offensive linemen rock back on their heels. He might even put some of them on their back. And I think everyone's looking forward to Jake Brendel versus CJ West and Jake Brendel versus Alfred Collins in training camp. Those are going to be some fun situations because he's not built for what they provide, and that's going to be fun.
All right, let me get to a few of these questions. First, let's do that starred question from Lowbridge. Let's see. Safety position shakeout. Seems like we have a ton of guys. I think Brown and Mustafa on the same field would be two similar skill sets. Do you feel we need a true center fielder? I do. I don't know that Ant agrees with that, but here's the thing with Mustafa. I don't know when he's going to return, but it's probably going to be after the season starts. Jair Brown I think he should be good for training camp. But then you have these backup safeties like Jason Pinnock, Marquise Siegel, Jalen Mahoney, Richie Grant, George Odom. Like these guys, somebody's going to have to step up and play, because if Mustafa doesn't start the season, to me it sounds like he's not going to, then who's going to be that guy? I mean, Siegel's a rookie, so are they really going to put him in that role? I don't know. Would it be Pinnock? Would he be the most likely to fill that spot? And then I'll let you answer the rest of that question.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic is the safety room with Malik Mustafa being out. I think it kind of changed some things. And so I do think it's probably realistic that he's going to miss the first 4 games of the season, and they're going to have to go a different direction. And Jair Brown is probably going to start. They're going to give him every opportunity to be that guy. And then finding a running mate for him, I think is going to come down to a few individuals. Now, I do know that they love Marquise Siegel. That's one of the things I've heard that's been consistent from what I've been reading, is that the coaching staff is so high on Marquise Siegel's intelligence and football IQ. That tells me that he could be a true center fielder, because instincts and being able to understand what you're supposed to do can make up for a lot of things. But also he has 4.3 speed. So he's going to have the ability to do it all. But I brought this up before. It's a tough transition for rookies from college to the NFL and being able to start right away. Only the few and the proud can do that. I think that it's a struggle. So I think that it's probably going to come down to one of these veterans. So Richie Grant, Jason Pinnock, those guys to me make the most sense. I know George Odom's on this team, but they've tried to start George Odom. It didn't really work out. I think he's too similar to Jair Brown. Pinnock is the one that kind of sticks out to me because he's a Robert Saleh draft pick when he was with the New York Jets. And so that one makes a lot of sense. He used to play nickel corner, which means he's got coverage skills. And he's just a veteran that can operate not only in the deep part of the field. I think he could play a deep half, and I think the 49ers are going to play more halves than they're going to play center field this season between the cover four. I think they're going to play more quarters than they're going to play anything else this season. So with that being said, I do think he can play a half of the field, and I do believe that he can come up in the box, rock you, can step up on a tight end or running back out of the backfield. So right now I'd put Pinnock ahead of Richie Grant and Marquis Siegel. But I think the perfect world situation is that Marcus Siegel gets ready to go, and at some point it's Marcus Siegel and Malik Mustafa, and then the 49ers are feeling really good about their safety room because I do think Siegel reminds them of Jimmy, and I think that he's going to be the guy that eventually becomes that guy that can do it.
Yeah, and by all accounts, he's pretty smart, and so I don't know the 49ers really like those guys. Let's see this question from Lou. Hello, Aunt Mark. Late again. Thanks again for your insight. Did you speak on Collins being able anytime soon to participate? Yeah, we did. He's supposed to be good for training camp. Filthy casual outside of the NASCAR package. Do the 49ers have a defensive tackle that can rush the passer in the middle?
This is one of the things that was probably the most shocking about the 49ers draft is I kept saying that there were one techs, guys who could play 2-eye, one tech all throughout this draft. I looked at guys like CJ West later on, but finding those true 3 techs, it was pretty thin. And the 49ers elected to go with a guy like Alfred Collins. Now, we could look at this and say, hey, they just got 2 one tech or 2 eyes that could come in and step in and we care all about run stopping. I think that they also see upside for Alfred Collins to rush the passer. I think that they believe Alfred Collins can be a 3 tech in the NFL. But right now, the guys that they know they can count on are Jordan Elliott, who has some pass rush ability, and Kevin Givens, who even though he was injured a lot last year, still produced. Mm-hmm. Those are your 2 traditional pass rushers. You don't really have 3 techs beyond that. Besides the guy that they got, Sebastian Valdez, the undrafted free agent from Washington, is the other guy. This team is built right now to stop the run. But on early downs, yes, I don't know how much pass rush you're going to generate. That's why I keep telling people that my belief is right now Jordan Elliott's going to start on the defensive line. I think that it's going to probably be Jordan Elliott and Alfred Collins that start at defensive tackle because Jordan Elliott has more upside when it comes to pass rush over the other guys currently. At some point, he will get beat out, but right now that's what I see, and that's why I think Kevin Givens is going to make this team and why it probably puts a guy like Evan Anderson potentially on the bubble because he doesn't have pass rush. That's the one element they're really missing with the new guys they added.
Yeah, that's a great point. Last question before we take off from Lowbridge. Is it true that Austin Pleasance has looked faster and more nimble? I think Firster might have mentioned it. How much of this is just coach speak? He's not the only one who's mentioned it. There have been people who have been at practice. I've heard this from multiple people that Austin Pleasance has looked really good. I've also heard that Colton McKivitz has looked really good. Now, again, there are no pads, so it's hard to judge certain positions like offensive line, defensive line. And so, but the fact that Colton McKivitz looks better and the fact that Austin Pleasance looks really good, I think is a really positive thing. Sounds like Spencer Burford is looking good. He's been replacing Trent Williams. And then Pleasance has been, I guess, on the right side. I don't know if he's moved back and forth or not, but that's a positive thing. And so maybe they knew that, hey, with Burford and Pleasance, we don't need to go out and get somebody because we already have what we need.
Well, I mean, they did try to sign DJ Humphries. They did sign Andre Dillard and Nicholas Petit-Frere. I don't think it's a complete indictment on Austin Pleasance. Don't get me wrong, but right now, the only thing that you can truly evaluate at practice is the way he moves and the way his technique with his footwork and his hand placement and all that thing. That hasn't really been his problem in his time in the NFL, where he's been on 5 practice squads during his tenure in the NFL. It has been what happens with recovery, lateral quickness, change of direction, those types of things. When he oversets, they beat him on the inside. How is he going to be able to handle those things when pads come on? I think is the bigger question. So once again, I love all the positive comments coming out about these guys, but I want to hear those things when we get to the
Yeah.
first weekend of training camp and pads come on. We start hearing that Austin Pleasance is moving guys off the ball and he's able to stick with some of these good pass rushers out on the edge. That's when we're going to get a real good feel for Austin Pleasance. I think right now, as much as I've heard good things about Pleasance, I still think Andre Dillard is going to be ahead of him when we come to this depth chart. And so I think that some point that will come into the space. But yeah, I like Austin Pleasance, but I don't love Austin Pleasance. I don't think enough of his film that I've seen make me think that all of a sudden, he's going to jump to the front of the line. But hey, I've been wrong before. Maybe I'll be wrong. And if Austin Pleasance ends up being that guy, I will cheer for him like no one else. But I'm just cautiously optimistic, just with a lot of these guys, because reports right now are crazy. Like I told John Chapman this the other day. OTAs are the new training camp with the way things are getting reported. Like they're in it right now. I can't wait to see what training camp's going to be like. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, and I don't know that I've ever seen that you've been wrong. So I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Hey, this is great stuff. You have anything else before we sign off here?
No, I mean, we're not going to be live next week. Next week's Father's Day, so everyone enjoy Father's Day. That we always get hit with all the holidays, Mark, because of our schedules. But it's going to be a fun one because by the time we come back, we will be able to talk about minicamp, but we're going to be right in the middle of the 40 days, so it's going to be interesting to see, what conversation points are out there in just these next 2 weeks. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, stinking Father's Day and Mother's Day, Easter, always. I mean, when we changed our schedule to Sundays, they should have changed all of those holidays as well. But
there you go.
So far, that hasn't happened. But maybe one of these days we can get to a different day. In fact, well, when the season starts, we're going to have to find a different day for sure. Everybody, we appreciate you joining us, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching or listening later. We appreciate that, and you guys really mean a lot to us. We don't say that enough, I don't think, but if it wasn't for you, we'd be sitting here talking to each other, which is fun. Sometimes we do that before and after the show, but it's more fun when y'all are in here with us. So thank you for joining us. Thanks, Ant, for being here. And everybody have a great week. We'll see you in 2 weeks from today.